This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the Moto G. Again, this is the second generation or 2014 Moto G, still remarkably cheap, $179. 5-inch display this time around, still a quad-core CPU. We're going to look at it now. So this is the second generation Moto G by Motorola. Android phone, no surprise there. Few things have changed. The price has not changed, nor has the processor. $179 unlocked. That's no contract. That's just $179, and you own the phone. It's a GSM unlocked phone, so there's the catch. Verizon and Sprint, folks, this is not the phone for you. This will work on T-Mobile and on AT&T. It'll work overseas on GSM carriers. No CDMA radios in here to work on Sprint or Verizon. So, still the same. 1.2 gigahertz Qualcomm Snapdragon 400 CPU, quad-core there, Adreno 305 graphics, which is what we see these days on entry-level to mid-range phones. That's a perfectly fine CPU. It's good enough to play games. The phone's not going to lag, anything like that. We still have the same Motorola kind of curvy design. Obviously not as fancy as the Moto X, nor is it customizable via Moto Maker, but still, I would call it a pretty distinctive look right there, particularly the back curve. Hold it like that so you can see it a little bit more. Gets thicker at the middle, gets thinner at the edges. Kind of shiny black front face right here, and the backs, just like the last year's Moto G, are interchangeable. You get this matte black, kind of slightly soft touch, rubbery finish back right here, and you can pull that off thanks to clip-on design, and you grab it by the micro USB port there. There's no particular lift point other than that, and you start just working your way around. Now, the more times you do this, the easier it gets. It'll get a little bit looser. And you can put interchangeable back covers on this that are $15 a piece. Gets you some jazzy colors, like here's a really zingy one on our last generation Moto G. There's also an integrated case cover that replaces the back shell and has a flip cover on it too. But anyway, take the back cover off. Notice the battery is still sealed inside. 2070 milliamp battery. But we have our micro SIM card slot right there. Our US models do not have a second SIM slot for a second line, but there is a blank here. We're assuming that maybe the Euro model will have that. And looky, something new, a micro SD card slot for expandable storage. Google still owns Motorola. Eventually, Lenovo will. Google hates expandable storage, but in the case of something like this, there's only 8 gigs of internal memory with about 5 gigs free. That's not really very much. So I think they realize that, so you got the SD card slot. This is running Android 4.4.4 KitKat, currently the latest, greatest version of the OS, and also not known for having the most awesome and robust SD card support. That means you can move some apps to SD cards. It really depends on the application, whether it touches core system files. And you can, say you want to download your music library from the cloud onto the phone. You're going to have to do that first to internal storage and then use a file manager to move it over to the SD card slot. So it's not wildly ideal, but I'm sure people who are adventurous may root this and then find handy ways to get around that sort of thing. Use SD card fix on it, other little utilities like that. The display, still 720p, but got bigger, 5 inches. Motorola said most people said they wanted a bigger phone. So much for all its reviewers who praised the 4.5-inch original Moto G and the original 4.7-inch Moto X. Apparently, we were in the minority. So it's still a curvy phone that's pretty easy to hold in the hand. Obviously, it is bigger. Since the resolution has not improved from the last gen Moto G, pixel density has gone down. It's still very respectable at 294 ppi. Still an LCD display, still not the most bright. This is the brightest it goes, actually, right now. Colors are reasonably nice on it. I mean, we have some pretty zingy cabbages going on right here. These are strangely dyed things. Now let's compare it to the last generation model, Moto G. In terms of size, you can see the difference. Also, the last gen has a slightly zingier color palette there. Just a little bit more color saturation on it. You know, not a huge difference. Neither of these is a wildly bright phone. You can see it outdoors. I used it to take photos outdoors in the sunlight. You can see it, but that's about all I'll say. It's decent brightness, not stunning. For $179, how are we going to complain? Now, notice the grills here. Stereo front-facing speakers. You don't have to get an HTC One M8 flagship phone to get that feature, and they are pretty loud and pretty full. Not quite as great sounding as the HTC One M8, and what do you expect? Again, for $179, it's pretty good. We'll play some media so you can hear that. Other than that, it's pretty standard fare. Micro USB port on the bottom for charging the phone and for copying media to the phone. On the side, nothing this side right here. Top, centered headphone jack, typical of Motorola. Has two microphones, by the way, one top, one bottom. Not four like the 2014 Moto X, but again, for the price, we're happy. Volume controls right here, power button over here. Pretty normal stuff for an Android phone. Feels pretty stiff. For the price, it feels pretty well made. And honestly, once you put a colored back cover on this, it looks pretty darn stylish for the money too. So what's the drawback? No LTE 4G. Now, why is that so important? It depends on what country you're in, for starters. But for countries that do have pretty pervasive LTE and your carrier has it, well, one thing I've noticed that even people who really are not phone aficionados like you guys out there who may know a lot about phones, when they say they like their new phone a whole lot better, it turns out they've gotten an LTE phone. They notice how fast web pages load, how fast apps download from the Google Play Store, all that sort of stuff. So it does make a difference, even to your average normal human being. We hope that Motorola will come out with an LTE version someday, but we're assuming it's not going to happen really soon since AT&T just decided to start carrying the last gen Moto G with LTE on their network instead of waiting for this guy. Clean Android KitKat right here, by the way, fast, responsive, even though it's a Snapdragon 400, not an 801, which would be the flagship CPU. That's plenty fast enough to handle the OS right here. And typical of Motorola, it is vanilla Android open source project style. So the only customizations on here are Moto Assist. We have Moto Assist right here, which is a lot like what you see on the Moto X 2014. So if you're driving, you can go into driving mode and do things like read your text messages aloud, and after scaring you to all heck the first time that happens, you'll probably appreciate it. Meetings, if you have a meeting schedule on your calendar, it's going to go quiet if you want, so you're not going to embarrass yourself in the meeting with your funny ringtones and all that sort of thing. And then there's the usual do not disturb or sleep mode. We got an FM radio right here, and I know some of you will appreciate that. And other than that, you're looking at pretty much just stock Android KitKat 4.4.4. We expected to get Android L pretty quickly as well. So nice selling point there. A lot of no-name, really budget Android phones, they come with an outdated version of Android from the start. And if and when you ever get another update, well, that's pretty darn iffy. What else has changed? Cameras have improved. That there was nowhere to go but up with the last Moto G, let's face it. That had a 1.3 megapixel front camera and a 5 megapixel rear camera. This one goes up to 8 megapixels, woohoo, and it has a flash back here. And we have a 2 megapixel camera up front, which does indeed deliver better video chat quality and somewhat better selfies. The 8 megapixel camera on the back is noticeably better than the last gen. Now, this is a $179 phone, so we don't expect too much from this. It's not going to be out the iPhone 6, which nominally has the same resolution display on it. And camera applications a lot like what we saw on the Moto X 2014 edition. You can swipe here to get to your settings. Notice it can do panorama, has automatic HDR mode. You can swipe from the other side to see gallery, tap anywhere to take a picture. And if you want to swipe to the side, you can use gallery, or photos obviously, we're just going to stick with gallery. And not too greatly focused there, but this is a pretty picture. Without super direct sunlight to cause too much blowing out of highlights, it can look really actually not bad. The golf ball there, that is totally blown out. But again, for a camera in this price range, it's actually not too bad. And Motorola generally doesn't impress us with their cameras too much, but at the lower end, they do a pretty decent job. Flowers here, well, they look nice, except for, of course, it's totally blown out the yellows right there. It's a sunny day, and honestly, the Moto X doesn't do a whole lot better there with that blown highlight problem. This a little bit better because it's about more varied setting right there. The flowers are still blowing out a little bit in the reds, which is typical of any cell phone camera. And nice landscape shot right there. This is actually pretty darn good, and this shows a little bit better color balance than our Moto X 2014 did, so good times there. Of course, the camera can also shoot video.
This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and it's Smackdown time.
Here's
this
video
is the
playback.
Moto X 2014
Obviously,
edition. This is
front
the
speakers.
LG G3.
Not bad sounding.
Similar designs in some ways, both kind of curvy, both kind of
See where our volume is?
Both 4G
It's not even
LTE
cranked that high.
displays on board, and we're going to compare them now. So here we have two top Android phones that are in pretty much direct competition.
That gets pretty darn loud and it's pretty full. There is some distortion if you play it at max volume, but we're not going to complain about that too much. So how about as a phone? Gosh, it is a phone, right? Well, it's just fine for voice calls. Motorola tends to do a good job. Their noise canceling is often a little bit aggressive, so you might hear some digitization of your voice if you're in a very loud place, but nothing to complain about. Now, with speeds being a 3G HSPA 21 megabit per second, not 42 megabit per second, which is where most carriers are these days, don't expect the greatest speeds. Especially here in the U.S., a lot of our carriers are actually starting to, well, repurpose some of the 3G spectrum to support 4G. Like AT&T is doing that with their 1900 megahertz band. Here's some tests we did on T-Mobile, who used to really rock some of the fastest HSPA plus speeds, and now we're seeing nothing too special right here. It's adequate. It's fine for certainly web pages and for email. And if you're downloading really big apps on Google Play, you're probably going to use Wi-Fi anyway. So as a consolation, there's that. But it's not going to be that super zippy online experience. It is fast enough to stream 720p video. And, well, that's all this display can render is 720p anyway. Yeah, so not the fastest speeds, but that is what it is. And again, it's $179. It's 3G only. With last year's Moto G, when they came out with an LTE version, that one was $40 more. So we expect if that happens again, you're probably looking at $229. Now we'll check out Gaming with Zombie World War, which is one of those free zombie shooter games. Sort of more like Zombie Tower Defense, but hey. The graphics look good on it. Not really mind-blowing action here, but you know. Speakers are plenty loud. Works fine. For your racing types, it can also handle Asphalt 8. And of course, things like Plants vs. Zombies are just fine too. So speaking of performance, how about benchmarks? We put it through its paces and tell you the benchmark numbers now. As you expect for the Snapdragon 400, it scores about half of the Snapdragon 800 or 801. Quadrant 8,908. Antutu 17,970. 3D Mark Ice Storm Unlimited 4,680. There, that's less than actually half of what you see on the Snapdragon 800. SunSpider JavaScript test using Chrome. Chrome is the one web browser that is pre-installed here. 1,453. That's not really very impressive there. The Moto X 2014 edition is, well, twice as fast at 776. There, that doesn't always require a faster CPU. It also has to do with browser optimizations and so on in the device. Obviously, Moto didn't put as much work into their $179 model there. Google Octane 2, 2,035. In terms of features, you have single band, 2.4 gigahertz band, Wi-Fi 802.11 BGN, Bluetooth 4.0. There is no NFC here. There is, of course, a GPS. Everything has a GPS these days in the way of a phone. As we said, there's that FM radio inside and the 2070 milliamp hour battery, which is the same capacity as the last gen Moto G, our little pretty friend right over here next to it. But given that pretty much everything is the same except for the screen size has jumped to half an inch, but it has not gone up in resolution, we're not seeing a huge difference in battery life between these two, and that's a good thing. So this is certainly, especially because there's no 4G LTE on here, this is certainly a last-you-all-day phone unless you're, well, playing a whole lot of Zombie World War or using this as GPS for long trips, that sort of thing. You get the idea. So honestly, it's hard to beat this if you're looking for a really inexpensive unlocked GSM phone. It has good build quality. It's sturdy enough. You can get for just $15 different back covers. It's always nice when the accessories are not wildly expensive relative to the initial cost of the product. Camera's not so bad at all. Screen, it could be brighter, but it's fine, certainly for indoor use, and decent looking device, front-facing speakers. The only thing it's missing is really LTE. So that's the 2014 Moto G. It's available now direct from Moto's website, and also Best Buy is carrying this too. For $179 from a name brand manufacturer, frequent OS updates, a brand you can trust, it's pretty amazing. I think a lot of you are going to want to wait for the LTE 4G version, which we hope is coming. Motorola hasn't said that, but they did that with the last gen Moto G, so there's a chance. Anyway, If you're looking for a budget unlock phone, GSM networks, hard to beat this one as long as you're okay with 3G only. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full review, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.